The worst part about being worshipped as a god wasn't the constant bowing, though that got old fast. It wasn't even the ceremonial fruit they kept shoving in his face, which tasted like a mixture of cotton candy and regret. No. The worst part was that Ethan Reyes had absolutely no idea how he'd gotten into this mess, and even less idea how to get out of it. "Oh, beautiful one," chanted the dozen translucent aliens currently prostrating themselves before him, their skin pulsing with rainbow patterns that made Ethan slightly dizzy. "Grant us your divine wisdom!" Ethan stared down at them, still wearing his torn spacesuit and sporting what he was pretty sure was alien moss in his hair. His most impressive skill was making microwave burritos, and these beings expected him to, what? Part seas? Turn water into wine? He couldn't even turn water into decent coffee with the ship's broken filtration system. Ethan began, then stopped. How exactly did one tell a group of devoted worshippers that they'd made a terrible mistake? "Look, I think there's been some kind of mix-up." "Silence!" The tallest alien, who looked like someone had crossed a supermodel with a jellyfish, raised her hand dramatically. The beautiful one must not doubt his own magnificence. This is fine, Ethan thought. This is totally, completely fine. I've just crash-landed on an alien planet where the locals think I'm their messiah. What could possibly go wrong? 6 hours earlier, the crash had not been gentle. Ethan's exploration vessel, the Wanderer, had gone from sleek marvel of human engineering to expensive space junk in approximately 12 seconds. The last thing he remembered before blacking out was the cheerful AI voice announcing, "Hell breach detected. Have a pleasant day." Have a pleasant day. Right. Thanks, Aria. Really helpful. He woke to the shriek of alarms, the taste of acrid smoke, and what felt like a marching band having a very enthusiastic practice session inside his skull. Through the cracked viewport, he could see a landscape that looked like someone had dipped an entire planet in rainbow sherbet, and then added extra glitter for good measure. "Status report," he croaked. Then remembered his AI was probably as dead as his chances of getting home anytime soon. With considerable effort and a lot of creative swearing, Ethan managed to pry open the emergency hatch. He stumbled out onto ground that felt like walking on memory foam, if memory foam could pulse with a faint heartbeat and glow softly in 17 different colors. "Great," he muttered, brushing debris from his suit. "Just fantastic. Stranded on planet Disco Ball, with a ship that looks like it went through a blender." He took a deep breath of air that tasted faintly of vanilla and ozone. "Okay, Ethan. You're a xenobiologist. You've trained for this. Sort of. Not really. Who are we kidding? Nobody trains for this." The landscape around him was breathtaking in a way that made his eyes water, and not just from the crash. Purple trees that seemed to be made of crystallized light stretched toward a sky painted in impossible shades of gold and pink. 2 suns hung overhead like cosmic disco balls, casting everything in a dreamy, ethereal glow that would have been beautiful if Ethan weren't currently stranded with no way home and a rapidly dwindling supply of emergency rations. "Note to self," he said aloud, a habit he'd developed during long solo missions. "Next time, maybe don't volunteer for the Explore Unknown Sectors assignment. Desk job is looking pretty good right about now." That's when he heard the singing. It started as a low, melodic humming that seemed to come from the trees themselves. Then it grew louder, more complex, with harmonies that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. It was beautiful, haunting, and absolutely terrifying, because it meant he wasn't alone. "Hello?" he called out, immediately regretting it. Rule number 1 of alien contact: don't announce your presence until you know what you're dealing with. But it was too late now. The singing stopped. For a moment, the only sounds were the gentle whisper of wind through the crystal trees and the distant hum of his dying ship. Then, slowly, figures began to emerge from the purple forest. Ethan's first thought was that they were the most beautiful beings he'd ever seen. His second thought was that they were probably going to kill him. They moved with fluid grace, like dancers performing underwater. Their skin was translucent, revealing networks of light that pulsed and flowed beneath the surface in hypnotic patterns. They were tall. The shortest was at least 7 feet, with elongated limbs and faces that seemed almost human, except for the large, luminous eyes that reflected the light of the twin suns. Okay, Ethan whispered to himself. First contact protocol. Stay calm. Show no aggression. Try not to accidentally start an interplanetary war. You know, the usual Tuesday stuff. The tallest of the beings stepped forward, and Ethan had to consciously keep his jaw from dropping. She, he was pretty sure it was a she, looked like someone had managed to capture starlight and weave it into the shape of a person. Her hair flowed around her like liquid silver, and the patterns under her skin pulsed with colors he didn't have names for. She tilted her head, studying him with those large, impossible eyes. Then she spoke, and her voice was like wind chimes made of pure music. "Behold," she announced, her words somehow perfectly understandable, despite clearly not being English. "The beautiful one has descended from the heavens." Ethan blinked. "I'm sorry. What now?" A collective gasp went up from the assembled beings. They dropped to their knees, or what Ethan assumed were knees, in perfect unison. Did she just call me beautiful?" Ethan asked, looking around in confusion. "Because I've got to tell you, I've been in a spaceship for 3 months. I just crashed, and I'm pretty sure I smell like burnt electronics and despair." "The prophecy!" another voice called out.
The prophecy is fulfilled!
"Prophecy?" Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "What prophecy? I didn't sign up for any prophecy." The beautiful being, who he was already starting to think of as the head worshipper, stepped closer. The patterns under her skin were pulsing rapidly now, cycling through colors that made Ethan's eyes water. "For 1,000 cycles, we have waited," she intoned, her voice taking on a reverent quality that made Ethan deeply uncomfortable. The ancient texts spoke of one who would come from beyond the stars, one whose form would embody perfect symmetry, whose presence would herald a new age of enlightenment. Perfect symmetry? Ethan looked down at himself. His suit was torn, he had a bruise on his forehead that was probably turning purple, and he was pretty sure his left boot was on fire. Are we looking at the same person here? "Your modesty only confirms your divinity," head worshipper exclaimed, and the crowd murmured agreement. "My modesty?" Ethan threw his hands up in exasperation. "Lady, I'm not being modest, I'm being realistic. I'm a xenobiologist from Earth who just crashed his ship. The most divine thing I've done today is not die in a fiery explosion." The crowd gasped again, and Ethan realized he'd made a mistake. "Ah!" Head worshipper's eyes went wide. "The third sacred realm! You come from the birthplace of the Ancient Ones." The Ancient Ones? Ethan felt a headache coming on. Who are the Ancient Ones? The beings of legend who possess the secret of perfect biological form. Another alien explained helpfully. Their planet was said to be blue, like the sacred waters, orbiting a single sun like the eye of creation. Ethan stared at them. "You mean humans?" "Human," head worshipper repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. "Yes, the human of the third sacred realm." "Oh, for the love of..." Ethan stopped himself. Getting frustrated wasn't going to help. He needed to think this through logically. "Okay, look, I'm flattered, really, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not divine. I'm just a guy who got lost in space." "Lost?" A new voice spoke up, deeper and more skeptical than the others. Another tall alien approached, this one with skin that shifted between deep blue and stormy grey. Unlike the others, he wasn't kneeling. "Oracle Thesian, perhaps we should be more cautious. This creature could be a deceiver." "Creature?" Ethan frowned. "Okay, That's the second time I've been called a creature today. I prefer confused astronaut, thank you very much. The blue-grey alien who Ethan immediately dubbed skeptical guy crossed his arms. What proof do we have that this being is truly the beautiful one? Where are the signs? The miracles? Miracles? Ethan laughed, a slightly hysterical edge creeping into his voice. The only miracle here is that I survived the crash. Unless you count my ability to make really terrible coffee, I'm fresh out of miracles. Coffee? Oracle Thessian, apparently head worshipper had a name, leaned forward with interest. What is this coffee? It's a drink. Ethan explained, grateful for what seemed like a normal question. You grind up beans from a plant, add hot water, and it makes a beverage that helps you stay awake. It's not exactly miraculous. A drink that grants wakefulness. Session breathed. Made from the ground essence of plants. Truly, his wisdom knows no bounds. That's not. Ethan started, then gave up. You know what? Sure. Coffee is magical. Why not? At this point, I'm rolling with it. Skeptical guy, who Thessian addressed as General Arxon, didn't look convinced. Oracle, we cannot simply accept every traveler who falls from the sky. The safety of our people is form. Thessian interrupted, gesturing at Ethan with obvious reverence. Look at the symmetry, the proportions. He is exactly as the ancient texts described. Ethan looked down at himself again. He was pretty average as humans went. 5'10", brown hair, brown eyes, the kind of face that blended into crowds back on Earth. What exactly do these texts say? They speak of a being with two eyes placed in perfect balance. The Hessian began, her voice taking on a chant-like quality. With hair the color of rich earth, eyes like the warm soil of the sacred groves. His limbs would be 4 in number, 2 for walking, 2 for grasping, arranged in divine symmetry. That's just how humans are built, Ethan said slowly. We all look like this. Session's eyes went wide. There are more like you. Billions, Ethan said, then immediately regretted it as another gasp went up from the crowd. An entire realm of beautiful ones, someone whispered. The third sacred realm must be paradise itself, another added. Paradise? Ethan thought of Earth. The traffic, the pollution, the fact that he'd left because he was bored with his life. Well, I mean, it has its moments, but... Enough! Arxon stepped forward, his skin now pulsing with agitated red patterns. Pretty words, and strange claims prove nothing. If he is truly divine, let him demonstrate his power. My power? Ethan squeaked. What kind of power? Show us a miracle, someone called from the crowd. Heal the sick, called another. Make the suns dance! Command the very air.
Okay.
Ethan held up his hands, and miraculously, the crowd fell silent. Look, I'm not that kind of... I don't do the flashy miracle thing. I'm more of a subtle deity. Yeah, mysterious ways and all that. Mysterious ways, Session repeated, nodding sagely. Of course, the truly divine do not need to prove themselves with crude displays of power. Right. Ethan seized on this. Exactly. Very crude. I prefer the gentle approach. Working through natural means. You know, helping people help themselves. Very philosophical. Arxon still looked skeptical, but some of the tension had gone out of his posture. And what would you have us do? If you are indeed what Thessian believes, Ethan thought frantically. What did divine beings usually want? Well, first, I could really use some food and water. Crashing takes a lot out of a guy. And maybe somewhere to rest. Even gods need their beauty sleep. Beauty sleep! Thessian clapped her hands together. Truly, his wisdom extends to all things. Also, Ethan continued, warming to his theme, I should probably take a look around. Get to know your people, understand your culture. Can't very well help if I don't know what kind of help you need, right? Wise beyond measure, Bashan agreed. Come, we shall take you to Celestial Haven, our greatest city. You shall have the finest chambers, the most exquisite foods, everything befitting your divine status. Divine status, Ethan repeated weakly. Right, that's me. Definitely divine. Super divine, the most divine guy you'll ever meet. As they began to walk, or, in the alien's case, glide, through the crystal forest, Ethan found himself surrounded by chattering Kaelthari. Apparently, that's what they called themselves. They peppered him with questions about everything from his celestial vessel to his sacred garments, to whether his hair was naturally earth-blessed, or if he had to perform special rituals to maintain its color. It's just brown, he kept saying. Regular, ordinary brown. No rituals required. Such humility, they would respond. Truly divine. A young Kaelthari, her skin shimmering with excited pink and gold patterns, skipped alongside him. Beautiful one. Is it true that you can make the miracle drink? The coffee? Well, yeah, if I had the right equipment and some actual coffee beans, Ethan said. But I don't have either of those things. So, he speaks of sacred beans, the young one exclaimed to her companions. And mystical equipment. The complexity of his divine craft. They're not sacred, Ethan protested. They're just beans. You grow them on plants. It's agriculture, not mysticism. Agriculture, Bashan mused. The art of coaxing life from the earth. Yet another divine domain in which you have mastery. Ethan was starting to realize that literally everything he said was being interpreted as evidence of his godhood. He could probably tell them his shoe size and they'd find some way to make it sound prophetic. Tell us about your realm, another Kaelthari requested. What is it like to live among the stars? I don't live among the stars, Ethan said, automatically. I live on a planet, just like you do. Earth has trees and oceans and lots of people who are exactly like me. Normal people, nothing special about any of us. Modest, they chorused. So modest and humble. The most humble of gods. I'm not, Ethan started, then stopped. There was no point. Every denial just convinced them further of his divine nature. As they walked, Ethan got his first real look at Kaelthari society. The forest around them was clearly cultivated. The crystal trees grew in pleasing patterns, their branches intertwining to create natural archways and walkways. Smaller Kaelthari tended to garden beds filled with plants that glowed in soft pastels, their leaves chiming like wind bells when the breeze touched them. This is beautiful, Ethan said, momentarily forgetting his situation. You've created a living work of art. Created? Feshen looked puzzled. We do not create, beautiful one. We simply tend to what grows. Creation is the domain of the divine, right? Ethan said. Of course it is. They crested a small hill, and Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Ahead of them, floating perhaps 100 feet above the forest canopy, was a city that defied everything he understood about architecture and physics. Celestial Haven looked like someone had taken a collection of nautilus shells, blown them up to building size, and then arranged them in a complex three-dimensional mandala. The structures were clearly grown rather than built, their surfaces flowing and organic, gleaming with the same inner light as the Kaelthari themselves. Delicate bridges of what looked like crystallized air connected the floating buildings, and gardens cascaded down from terraces in waterfalls of light and color. How? Ethan breathed. The city grows as we need it, Session explained. We sing to it, and it responds. The harmony between our people and our homes is one of our most treasured traditions. You sing buildings into existence, but not existence, Arxon corrected, speaking for the first time since they'd started walking. Growth. The seeds of the city have always been here. Our songs simply encourage them to flourish. That's actually incredible, and Ethan said. The biotechnology involved, the acoustic engineering. Do you realize what an achievement this is? Biotechnology? Session repeated the unfamiliar word. The science of using living systems to create tools and structures, Ethan explained, then caught himself. I mean, the divine art of harmonizing with life, energy?
Exactly.
Session beamed. You understand our ways perfectly. Of course he does, Arxon said dryly. He is supposedly divine. As they approached the city, Ethan noticed that the ground beneath the floating structures was dotted with what looked like elevator platforms, circular discs of the same crystalline material as the city itself. Thessian stepped onto one and gestured for Ethan to join her. Ethan said, eyeing the platform dubiously. Is this thing safe? Safe? Session looked confused. Of course. Why would it not be? Well, it's just that where I come from, when things float without visible means of support, it usually means something's about to go very wrong very quickly. Session nodded wisely. In your realm, you must have different natural laws. Here, the platforms respond to our intentions. Simply wish to rise, and you shall wish to rise, Ethan repeated. Right, sure. Why not? He stepped onto the platform, half expecting to plummet to his death. Instead, nothing happened. You must focus your desire, Beshan advised. Feel the pull of the city above. Ethan closed his eyes and tried to imagine wanting to go up. He thought about elevators and airplanes, and that one time he'd gone bungee jumping on a dare. To his amazement, the platform began to rise smoothly and silently. Incredible, he murmured. Anti-gravity? Magnetic levitation? Some kind of psychic interface? The platform senses the harmony of your thoughts, Thessian explained. It wishes only to serve. Psionic interface it is, Ethan muttered. As they rose toward the city, more Kaelthari appeared on the bridges and terraces around them. Word of his arrival was spreading quickly. Ethan could see the excited pulse of light patterns under their skin, and their musical language carried clearly through the air. By the time their platform docked at what appeared to be a central plaza, a substantial crowd had gathered. The beautiful one, someone called out. He has come. The prophecy is fulfilled. At last. Ethan waved awkwardly, feeling like the world's most reluctant celebrity. Hi everyone. Thanks for the warm welcome. Really, it's very enthusiastic. The crowd pressed closer, their excited chatter growing louder. Ethan found himself surrounded by dozens of curious faces, all staring at him with expressions of awe and wonder that made him deeply uncomfortable. Now might be a good time for those quarters you mentioned, he said to Thessian. Of course. She raised her voice, and the crowd immediately fell silent. Our divine guest requires rest after his long journey from the sacred realm. Let us prepare a feast in his honor. A feast? Ethan perked up. Okay, that actually sounds pretty good. I haven't eaten since... He was interrupted by a commotion at the edge of the plaza. The crowd parted as a group of Kaelthari approached, carrying what appeared to be an injured member of their species on a stretcher made of woven light. Oracle Thessian! One of the carriers called out. Please, Kaelthari has been struck by the wasting sickness. The healers say there is nothing more they can do. Thessian's luminous patterns dimmed with sorrow. The wasting sickness has taken many of our people this season. I fear... She stopped, her eyes widening as she looked at Ethan. Oh no, Ethan said, recognizing that look. No, no, no. Whatever you're thinking, the answer is no. The beautiful one, Session exclaimed. Surely you can heal her? The crowd turned to look at Ethan expectantly. The injured Kaelthari, was barely conscious, her normally radiant skin dull and flickering, like a dying light bulb. I'm not a doctor, Ethan said quickly. I mean, I have some medical training, but it's basic stuff. First aid. I can't cure diseases, especially alien diseases I've never seen before. Your modesty honors us, Basian said. But surely you would not let one of our people suffer when you have the power to help. Ethan looked at the injured Kaelthari, then at the crowd of hopeful faces surrounding him. Every instinct told him to run, to confess that he was a fraud, to explain that he was just a lost human with no special powers whatsoever. Instead, he knelt down beside the stretcher. What are the symptoms of this wasting sickness? He asked. The light fades from within, one of the healers explained. First, the extremities grow dim, then the inner radiance dies. We have tried all our traditional remedies, but nothing helps. Ethan examined Kaelthari as best he could without actually touching her. He had no idea if human contact might make things worse. Her skin, normally translucent and glowing, was indeed dim and grayish. Her breathing was shallow, and the light patterns that should have been pulsing under her skin were barely visible. Has anyone else been affected? He asked. Is it spreading? Many have fallen ill, the healer confirmed. Always near the edges of our territory, where the crystal gardens meet the wild forest. The edges, Ethan repeated, thinking. What's different about those areas? New plants? Changes in the environment? Anything unusual? The healers exchanged glances. There have been disturbances. Dark growths appearing among our light gardens. We assumed they were a natural response to the sickness, or maybe the sickness is a response to the growths, Ethan muttered. Toxins? Parasites? Some kind of environmental contamination. He looked up to find everyone staring at him. He said quickly, the divine mysteries reveal themselves to me in complex ways. Very mysterious. Much divine insight involved. Can you heal her? Fashion asked softly. Ethan looked at Kaelthari again. If his guess was right, this wasn't a disease in the traditional sense. It was poisoning, environmental toxicity of some kind. Which meant, I need to see these dark growths, he said. And I need samples of water and soil from the affected areas. Also, do you have anything like activated charcoal? Something that absorbs toxins. We have cleansing crystals. One of the healers offered. They purify water and air. Perfect. Bring those, and I need the cleanest, purest water you can find. And someone who knows about your people's biology, how your light systems work, what makes them function. You have a plan? Thessian asked. Maybe, Ethan said. It's not exactly miraculous, but it might work. Sometimes the best divine intervention is just good old-fashioned problem solving. Problem solving, Thessian repeated reverently. The divine art of unraveling mysteries. Sure, Ethan said. Let's go with that. As the Kaelthari hurried to gather the supplies he'd requested, Ethan stayed with Katara. He couldn't do much, but he could monitor her condition and try to make her comfortable. He said quietly, when I woke up this morning, was it this morning? Time is kinda weird when you crash land on an alien planet. Anyway, when I woke up, I thought the worst thing that could happen was being stranded. Turns out being mistaken for a god is significantly more stressful. Kaelthari's eyes fluttered open, focusing on his face with apparent difficulty. Beautiful one, she whispered, her voice like wind through distant chimes. Just Ethan, he said gently, and I'm going to try to help you, okay? I can't promise miracles, but I can promise I'll do everything I can. She smiled, a faint expression that somehow made her dim features seem brighter. I believe, she whispered, then closed her eyes again. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. No pressure or anything? When the healers returned with the supplies, Ethan felt a familiar thrill, the same excitement he'd felt in his lab back on Earth when a particularly challenging puzzle started to make sense. This was what he was good at. Not miracles, not divine intervention, but science, logic, problem solving. All right, he said, standing up and addressing the assembled crowd. We're going to figure this out. But I need everyone to work together, and I need you to trust me, even when what I'm doing doesn't look very divine. We trust you completely, Thessian said, and the crowd murmured agreement. Okay then, Ethan said, shouldering his improvised medical kit. Let's go save some lives. And maybe, just maybe, I can figure out how to get off this planet without disappointing an entire civilization of alien worshippers. What was that last part? Arkson asked.
Nothing.
Ethan said quickly. Just divine muttering. Very mysterious. Don't worry about it. As they set off for the contaminated areas at the edge of Kaelthari territory, Ethan couldn't help but wonder what he'd gotten himself into. But for the first time since crash landing on this strange world, he felt like he might actually be able to help. Even if he wasn't a god, he was still a pretty decent scientist. And sometimes that was miracle enough. The adventure was just beginning.